In recent videos, we took a look at some cool British singles released in January and February 1966. Now, it's time to revisit some great British singles released in March of that year. One of the highlights of March 1966 was Substitute by The Who. But the story of the single is yet another example of the greediness of the music business. Earlier that month, The Melody Maker reported,
The Who, currently at 24 in the Pop 50 with Substitute, are involved in a record rumpus. They have 2 singles in Britain's record shops selling at the same time. Substitute, released last week, is on the Reaction label, owned by Polydor. Decca, the company who previously issued the band's records, have now released a new single by the group called A Legal Matter. The track is from the My Generation album and was written by guitarist Pete Townshend, who is featured singing solo on it. Shel Talmy, the independent record producer who recorded The Who's early hits, is taking legal action against the group following the deal with Polydor. Talmy said, "I have a valid contract with them. As far as we're concerned, Legal Matter is their current single release." At press time, Shel Talmy was reported to be seeking a court injunction to restrain Polydor from issuing Instant Party, which is on the B-side of Substitute.
As a result of the court injunction, Polydor was forced to withdraw the single. It was already available in record stores, and Substitute had already hit the top 20. But the label was forced to re-release the single with a new B-side. Oddly enough, this new B-side, called Waltz for a Pig and credited to the Who Orchestra, wasn't even recorded by the Who. The song was actually a recording by the Graham Bond Organization. At the time, the group still featured future Cream members Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce. The single peaked at number 5 in the British charts, and it was also a top 20 hit in several European countries. But that's not the end of the story of the single. That same month, Immediate Records, the label owned by Stones manager Andrew Oldham, took up Circles, which was the original title of Instant Party, and released a marvelous cover of it by Fleur de Lys.
Circles, my head is going round in circles, leading me back to you.
Circles by Fleur de Lys wasn't a success when it was originally released. But the track is widely considered to be the definitive freakbeat anthem of the 60s. Of course, nobody was using the term freakbeat in 1966. But the term perfectly describes this era in British music, when bands started adding psychedelic influences to the popular mod and beat sounds of the mid-60s. The group was originally formed in 1964 and went through several lineup changes during their existence. In an interview several years later, drummer Keith Guster, who was the only constant member throughout the group's history, explained how the band came to record the song. Keith Guster said,
"We did a month playing in German clubs throughout February '66 and met Phil Sawyer over there. He came back to England with us and joined the band. We'd only been back home for a week when we recorded Circles, with Phil playing one of the best guitar solos of 1966. Tony Calder of Immediate Records posted a copy of Instant Party by The Who. And he told us that we had the weekend to do our version. We drove up to London, and we played our guts out for producer Glyn Johns. And yes, we did think it was special, and I still bloody well do."
Despite drummer Keith Guster claiming that Phil Sawyer played guitar on the track, other sources claim that the guitar was played by Jimmy Page. Whoever it is, the guitar flourishes throughout the song are one of the highlights of the single. Several members of the band found bigger success in later years. Keyboardist Pete Sears went on to play on the first 4 solo albums by Rod Stewart, and he also was a founding member of Jefferson Starship. Bassist Gordon Haskell replaced Greg Lake in King Crimson and later enjoyed a successful solo career. Phil Sawyer replaced Stevie Winwood in the Spencer Davis Group, and guitarist Bryn Hawert became a pioneer of Jesus music in mainstream rock, and he has released some 22 albums and several singles since the 1970s.
Never seem to be sure that
This 45 by The Answers is one of the most underrated singles of 1966. The song, with its minimalist and discordant structures and raga-like guitar work, was quite ahead of its time, especially considering that this was released as early as March 1966. It certainly wouldn't be strange to mistake it for a psychedelic single from 1967. Oddly enough, 8 Miles High by the Byrds, another groundbreaking track which also featured prominent raga-like guitar, was released in the States just a week after this 45. Music changed so quickly in 1966 that it's always interesting to look at the chronology. So it's pretty astounding to note that this single was released almost 6 months before Revolver by the Beatles, 2 months before Paint It Black by the Stones, and almost 3 months before the Paperback Writer single, whose B-side, Rain, had a similar minimalist drone-like structure. Therefore, it's safe to say that this single, along with Shapes of Things by the Yardbirds, is one of the earliest examples of British psychedelia. The song was written by guitarist Tony Hill and produced by Jimmy Duncan. The single was barely reviewed in the press, only managing to get this small and not too enthusiastic review from Record Mirror. Later in 1966, guitarist Tony Hill went on to join The Misunderstood, an excellent psychedelic band managed by John Peel. And he also formed heavy prog band High Tide in the late 60s. Lead singer J. Vincent Edwards appeared on the London production of the musical Hair, and later enjoyed a successful career as a songwriter and producer. The Rocking Vickers were another band who released a Pete Townshend composition as a single in March 1966. The group is mostly remembered for featuring future Motorhead leader Lemmy Kilmister. The single was produced by Glyn Johns, and the group's recording manager was Shel Talmy, who at the time was in the midst of legal battles with The Who. The origins of this version are unclear. It's an obvious cover of The Kids Are Alright by The Who, but certain parts of the song are actually quite different from the original. And the tune features both additional and slightly different lyrics. Therefore, it's very likely that the Rocking Vickers actually covered an early demo version of the song which was probably owned by Shel Talmy. It's also very likely that Talmy offered in this song in order to add fuel to the fire to the whole legal matter with The Who. At the time, Lemmy Kilmister was playing guitar instead of bass, but it's unclear whether he played rhythm or lead guitar. The frantic guitar break featured in the song, however, certainly sounds like something Lemmy would do. The single got good reviews in the press. Record Mirror wrote, "Manchester group wailing up a lively storm. A Pete Townshend song. Could do well." But the single failed to chart. After the success of Keep On Running in late 1965, 1966 saw the Spencer Davis Group enjoying enormous success in Britain. Their fuzzed-out version of Keep On Running, which was originally written and recorded by Jamaican artist Jackie Edwards, granted the band their first #1 in Britain. Island label founder Chris Blackwell, who also produced the single, naturally recognized Jackie Edwards' important role in turning the group into an overnight sensation, and he commissioned a new song for the follow-up release. The song got excellent reviews in the press. The Melody Maker wrote,
"A marvelous swinging sound from the Spencer Davis Group, which must be an even bigger hit than Keep On Running." The lyrics by Jackie Edwards are tailor-made for lead singer Stevie Winwood, especially the part about being a little boy of 17. And the backing has the compulsive Spencer Davis Group sound. Stevie is helped vocally by Spencer and Muff Winwood. Expect this to be a giant smash.
It was indeed a giant smash. The single became the band's second consecutive #1 in Britain, and it was also a big hit in Europe. In the States, the song peaked at number 47.
I'm going up, I'm going down, I'm going up, down, down, round, any way you want me.
All these videos highlighting cool British singles from 1966 wouldn't be the same without some tough garage rockers like this excellent cover of The Standard by Jimmy Reed. The massive success of Satisfaction by the Stones in 1965 pretty much revolutionized music in both the UK and in the States. From that moment on, if the guitarist in your band didn't have a fuzz pedal, you were only half a band. This single is a perfect example of an era in which fuzz effects were everywhere. The song also features obvious Townshend influences, especially during the great distorted guitar break towards the end of the track. The song, just like most of their singles, was recorded at Abbey Road. And despite the fact that none of their singles managed to chart, their popularity in clubs all over Britain granted him appearances on television shows such as Ready Steady Go and Thank You Lucky Stars. The single didn't chart, and keyboardist Pete Sears joined Les Fleur de Lys shortly after its release.
If you feel that you're all alone and sick inside away from home.
Van Morrison's vocal performance on this track is one of the highlights of this single. Baby Please Don't Go and Here Comes the Night both became top 10 hits in the UK in 1964, with the latter even becoming a top 20 hit in the States. However, none of the singles the band released in 1965 managed to chart. And Call My Name, the first single they released in 1966, didn't fare much better. However, the song, which was written by Tommy Scott, got very enthusiastic reviews in the press. Record Mirror wrote,
Slow, rather tortuous guitar-thumped introduction. Almost animalish at this stage. Then, it's a roaring burn-up for lead voice in agitated mood. Easy tempo and a good commercial feel to it. Good ideas, and worth a place in the charts. Love Lawn, with beat.
Despite the good reviews, the single went pretty much unnoticed, and it failed to chart. Here's yet another garage rocker, full of energy and bite, with a sound that was very reminiscent of the American garage bands from that era. Simon Raven was not the name of the vocalist, it was the name of the group, who were also known as the Simon Raven Cult. The band featured future Deep Purple bassist Nick Simper, who also played with Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. Lead singer Buddy Britton had been part of the British music scene since the late 50s. The singer toured Britain playing rock and roll with a backing band that would later abandon him and morph into the Playboys, the band that backed legendary rocker Vince Taylor. Buddy Britton tried to adapt to pretty much every new music style that became trendy in the UK. He went from playing 50s rock and roll to playing Merseybeat, rhythm and blues, and every other new trend under the sun. By 1964, Buddy Britton and the Regents decided it was time to turn mod and change the name of the band. This was also due to the fact that none of the 9 singles that they had released had managed to chart. The group recruited Keith Moon as a drummer and changed their name to the Simon Raven Cult. However, according to bassist Nick Simper, just 2 days after accepting the job with Buddy Britton, Keith received an offer from The who were still known as the High Numbers, and left. I Wonder If She Remembers Me was the only single they released as the Simon Raven Cult.
And I wonder if she remembers me now.
It was a good song with plenty of attitude, but unfortunately, it failed to pick the interest of the record-buying public. The single failed to chart. And last but not least, the Dave Clark 5. By March 1966, the Dave Clark 5 still enjoyed a decent amount of popularity in the States. But their previous 3 singles hadn't even entered the charts in Britain. This song, however, was an excellent track which saw the band transitioning to a more mature sound. As usual, Mick Smith's vocal performance was top-notch, and the arrangement and structure were quite different from the previous hits. The British press was quite enthusiastic about the single. Record Mirror wrote,
Piano and guitars herald this one. Then, a thumping great beat gets going and the boys turn in a group vocal which is certainly strong enough to make the charts. There are changes of mood and tempo with interesting lyrics. Definitely infectious after a spin or two. The flip is by Dave Clark and Dennis Payton, with harmonica, yells, whoops, and a stack of excitement.
The single managed to reach number 12 in the States. In Britain, however, the record failed to chart. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to March 1966. See you next time.